Life can change in an instant, people say, but they never describe what that moment feels like. It began with a flight home for me. I had just completed one of the largest deals of my career while on a business trip in Atlanta. All I could think about was getting home to my wife, Linda, even though it should have been a victory lap and a time for pride. The longest time we had ever been separated in our 7 years of marriage was 5 days since I had last seen her. Her voice, her touch, and the way she pressed against me in bed were all things I missed. My job had benefited from the vacation, but I was so ready to get home. My boss, Brian Brown, who was also my father-in-law, was seated next to me in first class. Brian was a straightforward individual who started his electrical business from the ground up. I never thought I would marry his daughter when I started working for him right out of college. 7 years later, however, we both believed that we had established steady, secure lives. Brian stretched his legs out in front of him and remarked, "Good job on this one, Alex. Parker Industries was ready to sign with someone else, but you turned it around." I answered, "Just doing my job," but my voice was brimming with pride. "Still," he replied, "you earned yourself a nice bonus. I'll make sure payroll takes care of that when we get back." "Appreciate it, sir." Brian laughed. "Sir, hell, Alex, it's just us. You can call me Brian." I grinned. Force of habit. We listened to the plane's hum while sitting in pleasant stillness for a while. Then Brian smiled at me as the pilot indicated that we were going to descend. "I know you're eager to get home," he replied. "Can't imagine 5 days away from Linda has been easy," I chuckled. "Longest we've ever been apart. Pretty sure she's just as anxious to see me. Before everything broke apart, that was the last time I felt at peace. Although the airplane landed without incident, baggage claim was another matter. After 40 minutes of waiting, 15 more minutes were spent packing Brian's gear into the car. It was easy to drop him off because he lived only 2 miles away. Or it shouldn't have been anyway. However, I felt sick to my stomach as we drove into his driveway. 3 vehicles were parked in front. Linda's BMW and 2 more that I didn't know. Brian stiffened beside me. With a tense voice, I questioned, "You expecting company?" "No," he whispered, his face gloomy. I felt a chill creep up my back. Brian and I looked at each other. Then, without saying another word, we exited the vehicle, leaving the doors ajar. The front door was locked. Brian took out his key, but the deadbolt remained in place when he twisted it. It was locked from the inside by someone. Brian breathed out slowly. "Follow me." Silently, we slipped through the back door and around the side of the house. Other than the garments strewn on the floor, the living room was deserted. Clothing for men? Clothing for women? My heart struck my ribs hard. Down the hall came the sound of laughter and muffled voices. Brian's expression grew gloomy. He approached the master bedroom without saying a word or pausing. The door stood ajar, and within, my spouse was having an affair with another man. Not only her. My mother-in-law, Brenda, Brian's wife, was also present. 2 males, 2 females, nude, intertwined. Linda's voice sounded frantic and out of breath. "Oh God, baby, I love it." Then the camera made a sound. Before anyone even realized we were there, Brian had taken out his phone and started taking pictures. Linda froze at the sound. Then she turned her head slowly, her gaze locked with mine. I could see the sheer panic in Linda's eyes as soon as they met mine, the way her body tightened, like an animal trapped in a trap. No one moved for a moment. Nobody said anything. Then everything suddenly exploded. With trembling hands, Brenda hurried to cover herself with the sheets. In his haste to get up, one of the men, a wiry guy with a poor tan, slid off the bed. Before Brian's camera snapped once more, the larger man barely managed to sit up. Linda's expression contorted in fear. Alex Brian's calm, low voice broke through the confusion. "Not a damn word." The room froze at the sound of his deadly tone. I had to ground myself in the present by blinking as well. My whole body was trembling and my hands were balled into fists. I stepped back as Linda reached for me, her mouth opening as if she wanted to explain. The gap between us was as wide as a bandage. Brian turned and spoke steadily to me. "Are you ready?" I gave a nod. We both moved simultaneously. Brian grabbed 2 aluminum softball bats from the rack in the closet. I got one from him. He said, "Take the far side." I had no hesitation at all. The place exploded into turmoil as soon as we walked forward. With their hands raised in submission, both men scurried back in utter fright. Linda slammed herself against the headboard, her eyes wild, and Brenda let out a strangled sob. "Alex, please." There was a painful crack as the first swing hit the ground. The tan man doubled over and clutched himself as he yelled. Brian's bat hit its target before the other bastard could even react. A cry of pain ripped through the space. With their hands gripping their groins in desperation, both guys fell to the ground and curled into fetal positions. Linda and Brenda screamed, but we didn't turn to face them. We were concentrating on the men who dared to enter our homes and lives and expect to escape unharmed. Brian wasn't finished. He grabbed a pair of jeans from the ground and rummaged through the pockets before extracting a set of car keys. Then, another. Reaching the window without hesitation, he unlocked it and threw the keys into the darkness outside. Not a clink, only the gentle sound of grass rustling. I did as he said. Brian took the first man by the arm and hauled him up without saying anything else. "You want to screw another man's wife in my house?" he shouted. "This is what you get." Still gripping himself, the man sobbed, but Brian had no mercy. In a single motion, he pulled him to the window and threw him out. The man landed among the rose bushes below with a thud. I caught the second bastard by the nape of his neck while he was still struggling to breathe. I hardly felt his feeble thrashing. "You thought you could do this and walk away?" I growled. "Not today." I gave him a hefty shove and he tumbled out the window after his companion. Tangled in thorns, they landed with twin yelps of pain, moaning and swearing. Brian forcefully closed the window. Then he glanced to our spouses for the first time since we entered. Brenda was crying hysterically. As if she couldn't believe this was happening, Linda was staring at me, pale and trembling. Brian had a steely voice. "We're going to have a little talk." The two women spoke simultaneously. "It isn't what it appeared to be," Brenda cried. Linda pleaded. "Alex, please, I love you." Brian roared them to quiet. "Shut up." The room fell silent. First, he looked at Brenda. "You don't get to explain a damn thing. You just admitted you've done this before. Do you really think I didn't catch that slip?" Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as she gagged on her words. Brian went on, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You're not backing out of this now. You were screwing a man who wasn't your husband. That's not love, Brenda. That's betrayal." Brian didn't seem to care that she was crying more. He then looked at Linda, and my wife seemed smaller than I had ever seen her. "Alex," she said in a whisper. I extended a hand. "Don't." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, I swear, I never meant to hurt you. It was a mistake, a huge mistake." I gave a sour laugh. "A mistake?" With a short nod, she reached for me once more, but I retreated. "A mistake," I said again as I let the words sink into my chest. I excitedly waved around the room, saying, "Linda, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. This was a choice." She recoiled as if I had given her a slap. I forced myself to speak steadily as I let out a slow exhale. "You made that choice, Linda. And now you get to live with the consequences." Her breath caught. "No, you have 10 minutes to get your shit and leave." She flinched. "Alex," I looked across at Brian. He looked up at me and gave me a nod. He then took his phone out, tapped the screen, and raised it so Brenda could see it. "You have 10 minutes, he stated icily. "After that, anything left behind goes straight to the garbage." Clock's ticking. Brenda made a hurt noise, but she remained silent. Grasping the covers tightly, she scurried from the bed and headed for the closet. Linda remained still. I tightened my jaw. "Linda, move." Her lip quivered. "Alex, please." Don't make me repeat myself. For a long time, she looked at me while something broke behind her eyes. At last, she made a move. I didn't stick around to see her pack. I left that residence without turning around. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel when I climbed into my automobile. In an attempt to regain my composure, I inhaled deeply and then again. After that, I took on the road. I had no idea where I was heading. I simply knew that I had to leave that place immediately. Because regardless of how much I had centered my life around Linda and how much I had loved her, I no longer cared about that woman. The drive home is not anything I recall. I was tearing through the streets one minute, my fists gripping so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles hurt, and then I was pulling into my home. It seemed as though my brain was having trouble keeping up with reality, as if my eyesight were tunneled. Linda had left. I had lost my marriage. I was lying about everything I believed to be true. I hardly got inside before I started feeling sick. With dry heaving and my whole body trembling from the adrenaline rush, I staggered to the sink. With that woman, I had built a life for years, and she had tossed it away as if it didn't exist. I grabbed the counter's edge and sprayed my face with cold water. I appeared like a stranger in the mirror, with a pale complexion, bloodshot eyes, and a painfully tightened jaw. Not anymore. I refused to allow this treachery or her to break me. I was going to rid my life of any traces of her. I began with the money. For a short time, Linda and I shared one account. I took a seat at my workstation, signed in, and began transferring every last penny to my personal account. I wasn't stupid. I knew I'd have to give her something in the divorce, but I wasn't going to let her bleed me dry. Next, I made calls. First, a locksmith. Next, a divorce attorney. And lastly, Brian. The first ring caught his attention. "Are you okay?" I laughed a little dryly. "Not even close." He let out a sigh. "Yeah, me neither." There was a long silence between us. I said, "I'm changing the locks first thing tomorrow. After that, I want to get her shit out of my house." "You want help?" I paused. Then, yeah, sincerely, I didn't think I could do this by myself. Brian came to my house the following morning. He remained silent, simply put a hand on my shoulder, nodded, and entered. We started working right away. Everything Linda owned, including her wardrobe and the foolish ornaments she had scattered over the house, was thrown in the trash. It was mechanical at first, simply picking things up and throwing them. However, I later discovered a framed wedding picture stuffed in a drawer's back, and I felt something break inside of me. I hurled the glass, and it smashed against the floor. Breathing heavily, I snatched up the picture and tore it in two. Then again. I didn't let Brian stop me. He simply continued to work, going about the home as if he were possessed. All traces of Linda and Brenda had been removed by the time we were finished. Their attire? In garbage bags. Their photos? Lost. Their private belongings? Dispersed throughout the yard. They had been laughing behind our backs for years, making us feel inferior and gaining our trust. No more. I was enjoying a beer on the porch at around midday while I gazed at the mess we had created in my front yard. With his own beer dangling between his fingers, Brian sat next to me. He said, "So what now?" I let out a breath. "Divorce. A clean break. Nothing more." He looked off into the horizon and nodded. "Same." One more pause. Brian then grinned. "You know, the dogs like you." I gave him a blink. "What?" According to him, the puppies. Brenda's gone. "I don't want her damn dogs, but they've grown on me." I shook my head and laughed a little. "Yeah?" When he said, "You should take two. They need a good home." I considered it. Then he gave a nod. "Yeah," I whispered. "Maybe I will." After Brian left that evening, I sat in my now empty house and felt almost at peace. The ache remained, heavy and raw. I wasn't drowning in it, though, for the first time in days. I had a strategy, a future, one that was devoid of Linda, and that was sufficient. The following morning, I felt as though a truck had struck me. My entire body felt as though it had been wrung out and left to dry. Not physically. I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol after Brian departed, but emotionally and intellectually. I didn't have time to mope, though. I was finishing up loose ends today. When the locksmith finally showed up, I was already ready and dressed. He nodded and gave me the new keys after changing all the locks in the house. "You want me to install a security system too?" I said, "Yeah," without thinking. I wasn't taking any chances, but Linda wasn't the kind to do anything out of the ordinary. By noon, my house was once again officially mine, with the cameras up and the alarms set. No longer communal areas. Don't wait for the other shoe to drop any longer. I had made up my mind to keep Linda out of my life. She had other intentions, of course. My phone buzzed that afternoon as I was completing some paperwork for my attorney. "Linda." I debated whether to pick up while I gazed at the screen. Then I answered against my better judgment. "Alex?" she said in a little uncertain voice. I said nothing. She inhaled nervously. "Can we talk?" I squeezed the bridge of my nose and exhaled slowly. There's nothing left to talk about, Linda. Please, she said in a whisper. I made a mistake, okay? A huge mistake. But I love you. I love us. I let out a laugh that was devoid of humor. You loved me? You loved us? That's funny, Linda. Real funny. Her voice broke. Hey, Alex, please don't do this. We can fix this. We have to fix this. 7 years, Alex. Doesn't that mean anything? 7 years, I said again in a monotone voice. And you threw it away like it was nothing. A pause. Then she broke down in tears. Sobbing, I was stupid, she said. I was selfish, and I don't even know why I did it. I wasn't thinking. Bullshit. I didn't mean for my voice to sound that harsh. You were thinking, Linda. You thought about it every damn time you texted him. Every time you met up with him. Every time you climbed into bed with him. You knew exactly what you were doing. Her breath caught in her throat as she sniffled. I waited so she could speak up and defend whatever she believed was still there. However, she didn't. Since she was aware, so I said my last words to her. We're done, Linda. I hung up after that. I also blocked her number this time. Later that evening, Brian and I met at a little tavern on the outskirts of town. He appeared to be as broken as I was. A guy who was burdened by a betrayal that was more profound than mine. With his tumbler of whiskey whirling, he inquired, You hear from her? Yeah. He gave a snort. Let me guess. She cried. Told you she was sorry. Said she didn't mean it. I grinned. Pretty much. With a sigh, he took a long sip. Brenda tried the same shit on me. Even pulled the, but we built a life together card, I sneered. Unbelievable, right? He asked, shaking his head before reclining on his chair. So what now? Divorce is moving forward. House is secure. I'm going to take the dogs like you suggested. Other than that? No clue, I said, letting out a breath while gazing at the bottle in front of me. Slowly, Brian nodded. You'll figure it out. Between us, there was a comfortable silence that only two guys who had suffered hell together could comprehend. Brian then grinned. You should start dating again. My drink almost choked me. Jesus, Brian, it's been a week. He laughed. So? You think Linda was faithful until the day you caught her? Hell no. You wasted enough years on that woman. Time to move the hell on. Despite rolling my eyes, I couldn't help but smile. I'll think about it. The two puppies were snuggled up at my feet as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and reflecting. I wasn't drowning in rage for the first time in a long time. Wasn't fixated on Linda's actions. I had my eyes forward. I wasn't sure yet what. However, Brian was correct. I'd work things out. When did I do it? I would never turn around. For the time being, I was also never turning around. The life we had created together was ruined in one instant. It was 2 months later. It has been 2 months since I discovered my wife having an affair. I've had her out of my life for 2 months. Silence for 2 months. Linda had attempted to get in touch via her sister, mutual friends, and even an email that I erased without reading. She had stopped pleading, wasn't in tears. All she wanted to do was chat. I didn't. The divorce process was well underway. The attorney had ensured that she was not receiving any more money than she was legally entitled to. No long battles, no second chances. She had decided. She had to live with it now. I stayed close to Brian. The old man was tougher than he appeared, but he handled the divorce more difficultly than I did. He never mentioned Brenda's name again, put all of his energy into his profession, and spent time with his dogs. Me? I got to work rebuilding. I started by getting back into shape. I wasn't upset before, but there's something about betrayal that makes you want to work harder. I began lifting weights in my garage, running every morning, and doing all I could to get rid of the restless energy that had been lodged in my bones. I adopted 2 of Brian's German Shepherd puppies as my second action. They offered me something to focus on that wasn't my past, kept me active, and kept me busy. What about the third item? I resumed dating. Nothing dramatic, nothing serious. Simple talks, informal dinners, and a reassurance that decent ladies were still there. Women who were truthful. Women who were honest. Women who were deserving of loyalty. Brian and I sat on my back porch one evening while enjoying a few drinks and watching the dogs play in the yard. You look better, he remarked as he sipped his beverage. I gave a shrug. Feel better. A tiny smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as he nodded. Are you seeing anyone? I grinned. Dating. Nothing serious. Good. Don't waste your time on another woman who doesn't deserve you, he said, tilting his bottle in my direction. I gave his bottle a clink. Same goes for you, old man. He laughed. Hell, I'm done. No more marriage for me. Fair enough. For a while, we sat in pleasant solitude as the night air was filled with crickets. Brian then let out a breath while gazing at his beer. Do you think they regret it? It was obvious to me who he was referring to. I considered it concerning Linda, regarding Brenda, regarding the life they discarded. I shook my head after that. Doesn't matter. Brian raised his eyebrows as he turned to face me. I spent too much time trying to figure out why she did it. Too much time wondering if she'd ever realize what she lost. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because even if she does regret it, it won't change a damn thing, I said, taking a long breath and extending my legs in front of me. Brian grinned. Damn right. For the final time, we lifted our bottles. To fresh starts. To happier endings. To never turn around.